In 1979, a teenage girl accepts a babysitting job at an isolated home in the Minnesota woods. After putting the children to bed, she settles on the couch to watch TV, only to be startled by a phone call. She picks it up and hears heavy breathing, when suddenly a man's unsettling voice asks, "Have you checked on the children?" Nervous, she dismisses it as a prank and hangs up. 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. This time the voice asks, "Why haven't you checked on the children?" Panic sets in and she calls 911. The operator advises her to keep the caller on the line if they call back, allowing the call to be traced. Moments later, the phone rings again, and the voice snarls, "Check on the children now." Trembling, she keeps the call connected as instructed. Once more the phone rings. The operator's voice crackles through, urgent and frantic. "Get out of the house. The calls are coming from upstairs." Terrified but worried about the children, she hesitates before fleeing outside. She bolted out of the house, her heart pounding in her chest. There, a tall man stepped out of the shadows, his presence looming as he stared her down with a chilling intensity, and he asked in a cold, menacing voice, "Why didn't you check on the children?"
He made her call her boyfriend, but she dialed 911 and outsmarted him. What was supposed to be a moment of control and humiliation turned into a brilliant act of survival and justice. 27-year-old Robert Giles abducted a woman from outside a grocery store and forced her into his car. As he drove, he made a chilling demand, "Call your boyfriend. I want him to hear everything that's about to happen." But what he didn't realize was that the woman had other plans. Staying calm under unimaginable pressure, she pretended to follow his command, dialing a number, speaking sweetly, calling the person on the other end baby, but it wasn't her boyfriend. It was 911. The dispatcher immediately picked up on her coded language. While posing as her boyfriend, he kept the conversation going and discreetly dispatched officers to track the call. Meanwhile, Giles drove to a secluded spot behind an adult store near Jonesboro and continued his horrific act, unaware the police were closing in. When officers arrived, they caught him in the act. He was arrested on the spot and now faces multiple serious charges. This woman's quick thinking and the dispatcher's sharp instincts likely saved her life. Let us know what you think in the comments. Should this man ever walk free again?
One of the most successful serial killers in history is never talked about. Let's talk about Julia Tofana, who was said to have killed around 600 men. That is a lot of men. There is little known about Julia's life and upbringing. No pictures, nothing. This story takes place in the Renaissance period in Italy. Back then, women didn't really have any rights. Like, at all. They were usually forced into arranged, loveless marriages. In this time, when you got married, your husband owned you. Men had full ownership and control over their wives. Husbands would often beat their wives without any consequence. And unfortunately for the women, divorce was basically non-existent at the time. It wasn't even an option. So safe to say there was a lot of women stuck in abusive and loveless marriages with no way out. That's until Julia started her little business. Julia created an odorless, tasteless, and colorless, undetectable poison, and she put it in makeup products. She disguised her poison in beauty products that women could easily keep on their vanity and no one would question it. She called it Aqua Tofana. Pretty cool name. This product would allow women to discreetly kill their husbands over the span of 4 days. A few drops every day, and the initial symptoms would simply seem like a flu. A few more drops the next few days, and it would slowly weaken and eventually kill the men. You're probably wondering how she got away with killing all of these men without anybody noticing. Well, Julia was very careful. She didn't just sell Aqua Tofana to anyone. Any new client had to be verified by a past client and have a background check. Julia's clients were actually really protective over her as well and kept her secret. This went on for over 20 years. Julia would also coach the women on how to act around the days of the poison. After the first day, when the husband starts getting the flu symptoms, to act really concerned and call a doctor. The doctor would come and assume it was just a basic illness, give them medication, and leave. The key was that the women were the ones to call the doctor. They had to act concerned, anxious. When the husbands would eventually die, the doctors would be baffled. And the key to all this was that the women were told to demand an autopsy. But the thing about Aqua Tofana is that it was undetectable in an autopsy, meaning that all of these deaths came back as natural causes. Unfortunately, the story is too long for one video, so come back for part 2 to see what happens next.
This is literally driving me insane. I'm going to tell you what that is. All over social media right now, there are videos of Charlie Kirk's death, people that are slowing down the videos and analyzing them, and I have seen multiple talking about this dark spot on Charlie Kirk's shirt and how it moves when he gets shot. There are people claiming that this is blood, that it's a blood bag, and just overall questioning what it is and why it's moving across his shirt when he gets shot. I believe that this is a secondary microphone, and I'm going to show you why. If you go to Charlie Kirk's social media profile, and you look at some of his other videos when he's speaking on college campuses, he always has a secondary microphone that's clipped to his shirt. This is another one, so you can see it's like a little black square. And in this video, he was actually using a professional Rode microphone. This one is a square, but it also has a little puff at the end. That's a microphone like this. They're squares. There are also lots of different styles that you can use. And depending on the microphone, they attach to your clothing differently. They could have clips on them. They could be magnetic. All going to be different depending on the style. And it's not uncommon for people who are doing speaking engagements to have a main microphone and then a secondary microphone where they can use the audio from that mic for their social media videos. So as far as like why it's moving across his shirt, it's likely because it's attached to his shirt in some way, and the impact from getting hit and then the recoiling, however that microphone is attached, may have come loose and just went all over. I don't think it's blood. I don't think it's a blood bag. I think it's just a secondary microphone.
These policemen in Peru found a delivery driver with an 800-year-old mummy stuffed in his bag.
Stuffed in his bag?
Yes, bro. So in 2023, the police found these 3 dudes that were like drinking at a park. Police came up to talk to these guys, pretty much see what they were doing there, and they started searching these dudes. One of these dudes was a delivery driver out there, kind of like on some DoorDash type of thing, but it's like their version of DoorDash out there. And you know, delivery drivers that work for DoorDash, they'll have like those little red boxes, little red cases that they'll keep food in to keep warm or keep cold or something like that, right? Yeah. They searched this dude's bag, and inside they found an 800-year-old mummy in the fetal position. What? This dude was only like 23 years old. When they asked him about it, like, what the hell is this? There's a dead body in your bag. He pretty much explained to them that the mummy was his spiritual girlfriend and he named her Juanita. What? Yes. And the way he got it, I guess apparently it's been in his family for hella long, for like 30 or 40 years. And I think like his father or his grandfather bought it off of some dude. And it's just been in their family for hella long. And apparently this kid would sleep with the mummy, sit it on his couch and watch TV with it. Like he really thought it was his girlfriend for us. The police confiscate this thing from him because he's obviously not supposed to have this. They gave it to like some museum out there in Peru. Yeah. So that it could be like, you know, actually put on display properly. And what they found out is that the mummy wasn't a Juanita. It was a Juan.
It was a guy the whole time.
The mummy was a 45-year-old man. Like I said, it was over like 600 to 800 years old. The reason why he even brought it out of his house that day is because he wanted to show off to his friends the mummy that he had. Ew. The 2 friends that he was drinking with at the park. Ew. They ended up arresting him, and I don't know for how long he went to jail for, but he went to jail for a cool minute, though.
I just don't understand how people get into that.
Apparently, he thought that it was his girlfriend, though.
You know?
Police surveillance shows a 29-year-old inmate, Justin Avery, crawling into the women's section to SA her while in custody. The video shows Avery crawling on the ground, then sneaking like a spider through the isolation devices in the prison area before lying down on the woman's side, groping her, and then pulling down her pants. However, this action was noticed by another female inmate who yelled at Avery in an attempt to stop Avery's unlawful behavior. Upon hearing the female inmate's voice, Justin Avery shook her off. The sound of the female inmate's warning drew the attention of others on the scene, and prison staff quickly arrived to control Avery and remove him from the female inmate area. Justin Avery, who was originally detained for allegedly SA5 women near Arizona State University's Tempe campus, is now allegedly facing serious charges again. The incident has sparked a great deal of concern in the local community about prison management, with many calling for tighter prison supervision and security measures. Do you think the prison guards should be held accountable for his behavior?
This is the most dangerous female prisoner in the world, and you won't believe the horrible things she did to her family. Tanya and her husband have 2 children. They live in an apartment in Washington. One Wednesday, her husband decided to go out to buy a pizza because the kids were on a lunch break. At noon, he decided to go alone and leave their 4-year-old son and 15-month-old daughter at home with their mother. He thought his wife was a good person, having been with her for over 10 years. The trip would take at most 30 minutes. Shortly after he left, the 4-year-old boy was playing in the kitchen with his sister, and something horrible happened. She decided to put her daughter in the oven and turn it on. When the father returned, he entered the apartment and smelled burnt meat. But he didn't worry too much, since they had bought pizza. However, when he went to get a glass of water in the kitchen and saw what was happening there, he was completely terrified. And you won't believe what the mother did. The police were devastated, and they said they had never seen anything like it in their lives. Stay tuned, press the plus button, and comment baby for more details in part 2.
Born on October 13th, 1991, Sarah Payne had 3 other siblings, a younger sister and 2 elder brothers. On July 1st, 2000, the family traveled to Kingston Gorse in West Sussex to visit Sarah's grandparents. Following dinner, the family decided to travel the short distance to Kingston Gorse Beach, where they spent some time throwing stones into the sea. Sarah's parents and grandparents left the children to play on the beach while they went to visit friends nearby. Sarah's brothers, who were 12 and 13 years old at the time, were held responsible for their age. Sarah and Mike, Sarah's parents, had stopped at the local pub for a quick half pint on their way home. Mike's mother was standing outside while holding Sarah's sister's hand tightly when they arrived. Sarah and Mike were asked if they had a Sarah. They refused, claiming that they had left the youngsters to play together. Her brothers informed their parents that they were unable to locate her. Sarah had vanished after they had barely walked 150 yards from the grandparents' house. Sarah had gotten lost on her way home, so the family quickly began scouring the neighborhood for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. They had gone to play in a nearby cornfield, according to Sarah's brothers, as they had done many times before. Sarah had become separated from her brothers while playing and had vanished in an instant. Sarah's parents began a frantic search for their daughter right away, but to no success. What had started out as a pleasant summer afternoon had transformed into an endless nightmare. There was still no sign of Sarah after an hour of searching with the help of several locals, so the police were contacted. The police started looking for Sarah right away. Lee, her brother, informed them that while rushing home to inform his parents that they couldn't find her, he observed a man in a white van driving erratically and laughing broadly. The man waved at Luke as he passed by, and Luke said he didn't think much of it at the time. But now, he suspects the man of being involved in Sarah's disappearance. And so did the cops. He was quite scruffy, looking like he hadn't shaved in ages, Luke said of the man. His face was covered in white stubbles, and hair was flecked with gray. He was filthy and filthy. On the evening of July 1st, a number of suspects were taken in for questioning, including convicted sex offenders, and anyone who possessed a white van was asked about their activities. Roy Whiting, a well-known pedophile, was their first stop. They had no evidence against him when they questioned him. They only had suspicions. As a result, after interviewing him, they had to depart. In 1995, he kidnapped and raped a 9-year-old child and was well known to the authorities. Her disappearance occurred only 5 miles from his apartment, heightening suspicions even worse.
So check this crazy ass loophole I just went through. I nutted in the condom. Put water in the condom. Okay? Then, you want to take it a step further, put the condom over a light. At that point, you're going to see a homemade lava lamp. Not gabbing though.
Do you guys remember the 7M dance TikTok cult? I want to talk about it, so we're talking about it, so go grab a snack, I'll be here. We're just going to talk through the whole story, and then I want to know what you guys think in the comments, because I really feel, it really feels like there's something way darker and more sinister going on here. Influencers, Melanie Wilking and Miranda Derrick, once Miranda Wilking, are 2 sisters that love to dance, love to create content, and the 2 of them started a joint TikTok account under the name The Wilking Sisters years ago. Miranda is the older sister, Melanie is the younger one, and they grew up in Michigan. Both of them have been active dancers for years. Miranda even once appeared on the show So You Think You Can Dance, but TikTok was where they really blew up. They grew their page to millions of followers. They did synchronized dance videos, often filmed together in matching outfits, and they were picking up millions of views that eventually made them recognizable names on the platform. The sisters both ended up moving to LA. They were doing well for themselves, making social media content creator friends doing videos with them, and in comes 7M into the picture. 7M is a talent management / influencer agency based in Los Angeles. It was founded in 2021 by Robert Shin, who is a pastor, along with other family members. And the company primarily works with social media creators, specifically TikTok dancers, helping with branding, content production, marketing, and securing deals. 7M also had a creator house based in LA where creators would often go to create content. And in early 2021, Miranda met B Dash, whose name is James Derrick, who is a fellow dancer signed with 7M Films. Miranda starts dating B Dash, and then she's really swooped in and introduced to that entire world. Sooner than later, she gets involved with 7M and is invited to sign with them to join and be managed by their agency, and she does sign with them. Melanie, her younger sister, was also invited to 7M, and in the beginning she did like it, but then she saw red flags that did not align with her thoughts and beliefs, so she decided that it wasn't for her, and she did not join. She specifically thought that they were really weirdly demanding of her time, and she didn't like that, so she left, but Miranda stayed. Now, 7M Films is tied very, very closely with the Shekinah Church, which is the church that Robert Shin leads. The name comes from the 7 Mount prophecies that the church stands for, which are entertainment, education, family, religion, media, business, and government. And the line between 7M, the company, and the church and how closely intertwined they are is a blurry line, but we will get to that. But again, Robert Shin is the founder of the Shekinah Church, but also the CEO of 7M Films. Throughout the spring/summer of 2021, when Miranda joined 7M, her family starts noticing a pretty significant shift in her behavior. She stopped filming videos with her sister, drifted away from even talking to her on the regular, and that turned into her becoming distant and limiting communication with her family. She all of a sudden became really hard to reach and more guarded about her personal life. And instead, it felt like she was putting all of her effort and attention into 7M and spending time with other influencers/creators. Right off the bat, Miranda's sister Melanie, along with their parents, were unsure about 7M, but I think the real first red flag came in January of 2021 when Miranda canceled on going to her grandfather's funeral last minute, telling her family that she wouldn't be able to go for reasons that she could not explain. And that was really unsettling, and it was also the start of Miranda showing signs that her family was no longer a priority. Around this time as well, she starts shifting her professional work on social media towards 7M's management style, so she changes her look and even the style of her videos. Then a couple of days after missing the funeral, her parents end up flying to California to talk to her, and Miranda the entire time seems extremely disconnected towards them. According to her family, after that visit, she completely cut off contact with them. She moved without telling her family where she moved to. She changed her phone number, and that was the last time that her parents saw her for a while. And then in September of 2021, she marries her boyfriend B Dash without telling her family members. Her family later says that they were not invited, they did not know about it, and only found out after the fact, which was a huge turning point. Because making that big of a life decision without telling her family members was so out of character for her. Her going no contact with her family members continues progressively for an entire year until their communication dwindles down to absolutely nothing. And by February of 2022, her family had grown so concerned about how much 7M had changed Miranda that they turned to social media. Melanie and her parents turned to Instagram, pleading for contact with Miranda. And this is really when the story became public and fans of the Wilkins sisters realized that 1, they were no longer together, that they had not spoken, and that 2, Melanie and her parents had reason to believe that Miranda was being controlled by 7M. They said flat out that they thought that 7M and the Shekinah Church forced Miranda to cut off contact with them, saying that she blocked them on absolutely everything. They talk about how she missed the grandpa's funeral, how she had her grandma blocked on social media, and they say that every time she came up with an excuse as to why she couldn't talk to them or see them earlier on when they had been speaking, she would make weird comments and excuses that made it sound like she did not have control over her actions, almost as if she needed to get permission from someone to be able to do what she wanted to do. And when they would ask her further about it, she would just say things like, "You won't understand, you won't get it, I can't explain it to you." And they say that that kind of behavior started when she got involved with 7M, which her family refers to in the video as a religious group. And in that video, by the way, it's very, very clear that their intentions in making the video is not to say anything negative about Miranda at all. It's very clearly, we love Miranda, we care about her so much, we're so worried about her, we miss her, and we need help because she is under someone or something's control and something is not right. Because the way that she was acting could not be further away from the person that she is, or I guess maybe the person that she was. When this comes out, both Miranda and her husband James both go online to try and shut it down, saying that they are not underneath anyone's control, that they are the only people responsible for making their own decisions, and that they are fine, that 7M is fine and normal and purely professional. Miranda also stated on social media that joining 7M was something that was good for her, something that she wanted to do, and she described being a part of it as going through something
some sort of spiritual awakening. Around this time, people on the internet begin to speculate about how 7M Films and the Shekinah Church are so closely tied together because Robert Shin is pretty much the founder of both. And members from the church start coming out and saying that the 7 mandates that Robert teaches at the church, entertainment, education, family, religion, media, business, and government, are also enforced within 7M Films. And they say that 7M is a very, very religious group that follows the same ideas and beliefs that are preached at the church. Those allegations are later shut down by Robert, 7M Films, and the church, all claiming that rumors were just rumors and that people were wrong about all of their assumptions online. But when the Wilkins family's video on social media obviously went viral, other family members from dancers who were also involved in 7M start coming out saying, whoa, this happened to us too. Our friend or daughter or son also joined 7M and they have also completely stopped talking to us too. One of those people was a really close friend of James B. Miranda's husband. She went online to talk about her relationship with James, saying that she once considered him to be like her brother. And then she talks about how once he joined 7M, he became a completely different person, one that she really didn't even recognize anymore, and one that sounded almost robotic when she spoke to him. And this, as you can imagine, only made the public even more suspicious of 7M, because what was really going on behind closed doors that was making all these people act like completely different people all of a sudden and start cutting off everyone from their lives. Miranda's family did make an effort to contact authorities about their concerns, but because this group is a religious group and is associated with a church, there really wasn't much that law enforcement could do, because in the state of California, churches are very protected. Add to that the fact that they weren't able to provide any solid proof of what they suspected what was happening, and the fact that Miranda was well over 18 years old and very much a legal adult. There was really nothing they could do. And if you've heard about this case before, you also probably know about the Netflix docu-series called Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult. That was released in 2024. So Miranda's family speaking out about this online for the first time was early in 2022, and the documentary came out in 2024. The documentary coming out, of course, brought renewed attention to the controversy surrounding Robert Shin and his organization, but in the end of that documentary, it does sound like Miranda is in contact with her family members again. It sounds like she's seeing them every once in a while, attempting to fix their relationship, to, quote, fix what was once broken, in Miranda's words. Which may be true, although Melanie, her younger sister, has always said that things have never ever gone back to being even remotely close to how they once were. I think the general feeling of it was that Miranda did start seeing her family members again at times, but on purpose, just to kind of keep the public happy, to get the public to stop asking questions about what really was going on. As time went on and things kept going the same way, Miranda kept posting several different videos shutting down the allegations that she referred to as lies, saying that she is an adult and she is the only person responsible for making any and all of her decisions. She also at one point mentions that the people that were putting out this fake narrative about her and about her life, likely referring to her own family members, were only doing that to make money off of her. So let's talk about Robert Shin, the church, and 7M. A lawyer for 7M released a statement on behalf of the company addressing all of this. That read, quote, Miranda Derrick is a successful businesswoman and a loving wife and daughter who cares very much about her family. It is pathetic and how do you say this word? It is pathetic and contemptible to try to turn her private family matters into a tawdry public scandal for clicks and clout, end quote. But again, it just feels like that was their attempt to try and stop something before it got too big. So the church was established in 1994. It began as a Christian congregation and later expanded its reach through 7M Films, which was founded in 2021. And honestly, we don't really know much about Robert Shin other than the fact that it seems like he lives a very lavish, luxurious lifestyle in California, and the fact that he was once a medical doctor that practiced medicine for 7 years before claiming that God spoke to him and led him to leave medicine behind and to go into ministry full time. We also do know that in 2009, a woman named Lydia Chung filed a lawsuit against him, the church, and his organizations, claiming fraud and other labor law violations. She claimed that Robert Shin had used, quote, influence, mind control, coercive persuasion, oppression, and other intimidating tactics, end quote, to get her to hand over $3.8 million in property, other assets, and all of that supposedly in the name of God. She also alleged that she was forced to work 6 days a week without pay, but that case didn't end up going her way. After a bench trial, the judge ruled in favor of Robert Shin in every claim, completely shutting down her allegations. But that says a lot in my opinion, because it shows that this entire 7M dance situation is not the first time in which Robert's intentions have been questioned. That leads us to another important lawsuit that happened in 2022. A former dancer represented by 7M sued Robert and 7M, claiming that Robert tried to completely take control over everything in his life, down to his day-to-day actions, the things that he posted on social media, his finances, and even some decisions in relation to his health. And then in 2023, following Miranda's story coming out, following people starting to talk about this even more on social media, and a lot of people joining the conversation, a group of former dancers represented by 7M Films filed a civil lawsuit alleging that Robert Shin does operate a cult-like environment involving brainwashing and financial exploitation, and some dancers even mentioned SA, happening from Robert towards some of the dancers. That civil lawsuit claimed that Robert uses 7M to attract influencers and creators, then he makes them join the church, and then he takes control over everything in their lives to take advantage of them financially. And again, this is all alleged. We don't know anything for sure, and these allegations have been denied by Robert and his organizations, who have always said and continue to say that the claims are unfounded and a part of a smear campaign. But the case is supposed to go to trial in 2025, but the latest update I could find said that the case was supposed to go to trial in July, even though I literally don't see anything online about a trial. But what I did read about was what happened in July of 2025. Federal and local law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and IRS, conducted a raid on a property associated with Robert Shin in California. At that raid, at least 6 people were seen detained with handcuffs, but police did not immediately say whether anyone was arrested during the service of this warrant or not. That operation, the raid, was part of an investigation into allegations of money laundering, tax evasion, and other financial crimes linked to Robert Shin and his businesses. As of now, from what I could find, no criminal charges have been filed against Robert Shin, and he is denied doing any wrongdoing. The investigation remains ongoing, and an investigative reporter said that everything coming out about Robert is, quote, just the tip of the iceberg, end quote. People have also very recently noticed that it looks like all social media accounts from Miranda, James, and other 7M dancers have been wiped off the internet, which does make sense because this is an ongoing investigation. But I guess we'll just have to see what happens. But I really feel in my gut that there is so much more about this that we do not know. And I'm honestly, frankly, quite scared to figure out what comes out. But yeah, that's all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on this entire case, and let me know if you have seen that Netflix documentary. And yeah, we'll keep an eye on this. But thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This 22-year-old daycare worker was caught abusing over 20 babies and toddlers. Roxana Leka was born in Poland, but as a teenager moved to West London, where our case takes place. In 2023, Roxana started her career working in childcare like daycares and nurseries. And in 2024, she started her position at Riverside Nurseries. Here, the children that Roxana would be caring after were averaging in ages between like 10 months old and 2 years old, so like extremely young babies. And choosing to work being surrounded by a bunch of very young babies can be incredibly stressful. So you would assume that anyone that would choose to go into that profession would be like really passionate about it and really love children. Reportedly, parents were spending £1,900 or over $2,500 per month per child to send their children to this nursery. And every parent hopes that when they send their kids to school, a babysitter's house, a daycare, that their kids are going to be taken care of. But I'm sure with those parents spending that kind of money, they assume that their kids are going to be getting like the best care possible. But several parents began reporting that their little babies and toddlers were coming home from the nursery with red marks, scratches, bruises all over their little bodies. And there was no explanation for this. Also, several coworkers of Roxana started noticing these scratches and bruises on these babies after Roxana was alone with them. Several of them also noticed that Roxana was like pretty rough with these babies. She certainly wasn't like handling them with care. And that brings us to June 28th, 2024. A coworker witnessed and then reported to management that Roxana pinched a baby until it cried. And this is clearly very concerning. There was already a bunch of rumors floating around. So management went and they looked at the CCTV cameras at the time that this coworker reported Roxana was abusing this baby. And on the security cameras, they saw Roxana pinching this little baby on its mouth, its face, its wrists, just all over its body, deliberately trying to harm this little baby. Roxana was immediately suspended from her position, but now the nursery needed to find out if this was an isolated incident or something that she was doing all the the time. They got the police involved, and together they reviewed all of the available CCTV footage they had from Roxana's shifts, and this was over 300 hours of footage. And they discovered dozens and dozens and dozens of incidents of Roxana abusing these little babies and toddlers. And this is absolutely horrific abuse. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what they saw. To these vulnerable, little defenseless babies, Roxana would pinch them, scratch them, she would slap them, she would twist their toes, pull their hair, punch them, and kick them. And most of these times, it wasn't even like it was out of frustration, not that it would make it okay. There's never an excusable reason to abuse, harm a child. But the reason I point that out is because she was doing this just because she wanted to, because she liked it. It's like so sick in the head. There was one incident where Roxana just walked past this little baby minding its own business. It wasn't crying or anything, and unprovoked, Roxana just slapped it in the face. She would drag toddlers across the floor by their hair. She would grab them by their necks. She would push them, throw them. She would throw them on their heads. She was also always smoking in front of these babies, and she would like blow it out in them, like at them while they were sleeping in their cots. There was one incident with a little toddler boy. He couldn't have been any older than 2 years old. Roxana kicked him in the head and the face repeatedly, just over and over again. And while this little boy was on the floor crying, she came up and she stomped him on his shoulder. There were days where a single child would suffer abuse at the hands of Roxana Leca dozens of times in a single day. There were incidents where Roxana would smother these little babies for a short amount of time, but this she's escalating to a more dangerous place because it does not take a very long time to smother a baby to end its life. So this is just absolutely horrific abuse. I mean, these are babies. They're vulnerable. They can't defend themselves. They can't speak. They can't tell anyone what's happening to them. How much damage did she cause, not just to their bodies, but to their little impressionable minds? There's so much trauma here, and there's so much healing that needs to happen, not just for the babies, but for the families. How can the parents ever be expected to trust anyone ever again? And in the footage they had available for them, they saw that Roxana Leca had abused over 20 babies and toddlers. And on July 5th, 2024, at her home, she was arrested. At the station, she refused to speak to anyone. She was denying that she did anything wrong. She was charged with 24 counts of child cruelty, and despite a mountain of evidence against her, they literally had her on camera doing these things, she pled not guilty. When her trial started, she ultimately pled guilty to 7 counts of child cruelty, but kept saying that she was innocent of the other 17. I don't know if she was trying to make a plea deal or something, but they were not interested. And at her trial, she was really trying to play up that she was just this young girl who doesn't know anything and didn't know what she was doing was wrong. But in June of 2025, she was convicted on 21 counts of child cruelty, and she was sentenced to 8 years in prison, which is a long time, but by the time she gets out, she'll be 30, in her early 30s. Parents of some of the victims believe that if Roxana Leca hadn't been caught, she would have kept escalating her abuse until she ultimately killed a child. Let me know what your thoughts are, because honestly, I agree. But I'm absolutely interested to hear your thoughts on that. Also interested to hear what you think we can do to make sure that something like this never happens again. So interested to hear all your thoughts in the comments. While you're there, please be respectful to the families of these victims. These are really young people that we are discussing, and these families have a lot of healing they're gonna have to go through. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, but please be respectful. And while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Thank you to everyone that suggested that I cover this case, and I will see you guys all next time in my next video. Please be a good person to your fellow person.
Oh yeah, one more thing. If y'all see me on Love Island, mind your fucking business, bitch. I'm trying to find love, bitch. Y'all had y'all motherfucking chance.
On a sunny morning in the summer of 2001, Andrea Yates drowned each of her 5 children, one by one, in her bathtub. She started with 3 of her little boys and then her 6-month-old daughter, who she left floating in the tub. When her last little boy came in and saw his baby sister in the water, he asked his mom what was wrong with her before running away. Andrea chased him down and drowned him as well. She then laid them all in her bed, tucked them under the covers, with one of them holding the baby girl, as if they were all sleeping. Andrea would later be found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent off to a psychiatric hospital where she remains to this day. She's had the opportunity to leave and return back into society, but she's refused to leave the hospital. This is one of those cases that is really heavy, and it sparks a lot of conversation about postpartum depression and psychosis, and how religion played into her delusions and hallucinations. I have 3 little babies myself, so I think that's also why this case weighs so heavy on my heart. As always, this is a really graphic story, so proceed with caution. But let's talk about the case that shocked the entire world. This is Andrea Yates. She grew up in Texas and was the youngest of 5 kids. From a really young age, she suffered from eating disorders and depression, and once she turned 17, that's when she started contemplating ending her own life. Despite all of this, she persevered, and she graduated high school in 1982 as the valedictorian of her class. She was an extremely smart girl and super athletic too, as she was the captain of her swim team. After graduating college, she went on to become a registered nurse at a really prestigious hospital in Houston, and in 1989 she met Rusty Yates, who she would later marry. Rusty was a NASA engineer, so pretty smart as well, and they bonded over their views on Christianity and religion. Immediately after marriage, Rusty and Andrea vowed to have as many babies as nature would allow them, and this was really the start of their downfall. They began moving back and forth between Texas and Florida for Rusty's job, usually living in really small trailers and motorhomes, and by 1999, they had 4 kids together. So moving around that much in small places paired with having so many kids back to back, it started to take a toll on Andrea. Her first baby was Noah, then John, then Paul, then Luke, and lastly, baby Mary in 2000. Not long after Luke was born in 1999, Rusty came home one day and found her shaking and chewing on her own fingers. And the day after this, she tried ending her own life by overdosing. This put her in the hospital where she was prescribed some antidepressants. But overall, nobody really knew the extent of her mental health decline or how serious the situation was starting to become. She was released almost immediately, where she then begged Rusty to let her end her own life while holding a knife up to her throat. She was once again hospitalized for this, where she was put on an antipsychotic medication called Haldol. This medication plays a big factor as this case continues. After being put on Haldol, her condition improved pretty quickly, so once again she was released and instructed to keep taking the medication. But in July of 1999, so just 1 month after that first hospitalization, she had a nervous breakdown accompanied by 2 suicide attempts and 2 more psychiatric stays. This is when she was officially diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, mainly because she had thoughts of killing her children to save them from going to hell. Her first psychiatrist really understood the severity of the situation and urged Andrea and Rusty to not have any more children. They were warned that having more children would pretty much guarantee future psychotic depression, but sadly, they did not listen. Within 7 weeks of being released from this hospital stay and after being diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, Andrea was pregnant with her 5th and final child. Andrea seemed to be doing okay, all things considered, up until her dad died in March of 2001. This is when she reverted back into psychosis, started mutilating herself, and would frantically always be reading the Bible. At this point, she had her last child, and baby Mary was right around 4 months old, which is around the age when she started eating real food and not just milk. But because Andrea was in psychosis, she stopped feeding Mary the amount she needed. Her condition continued to get worse until she was in a near catatonic state, which once again landed her in the hospital. It's now May of 2001, 1 month before the murders of these beautiful babies. This is when Andrea switched psychiatrists, and even though she was obviously not doing well and in a catatonic state, this doctor thought it would be a good idea to completely take her off Haldol, the only medication that showed some sort of improvement. Even though she was clearly ill, Andrea was once again released back home to take care of her babies. It wouldn't be long though until she was hospitalized once more after filling up her bathtub in the middle of the day. She later told police that she had planned to drown each of her kids that day, but she changed her mind. She then planned to kill herself in the tub, but was hospitalized before she got the chance to do so. This brings us to that fateful day, June 20th, 2001. That morning, Rusty left Andrea at home to go to work, meaning she was alone with the kids. This was something that was not supposed to happen per her doctor's orders, saying she basically needed to be supervised 24/7, otherwise she could cause herself or her babies harm. But nevertheless, Rusty left that day, and I guess he thought that it would be okay because Andrea's mom was supposed to be coming over within the next hour to take over kid duty. But in that 1 hour hour period, Andrea snapped and did the unimaginable. In that 60 minutes, Andrea drowned all 5 of her kids, one by one, in the bathtub. She started with Paul, then Luke, and then John. And once they were all deceased, she laid them in her bed under the covers. She then grabbed baby Mary and drowned her as well, leaving her face down and floating in the tub. This is when 7-year-old Noah walked into the bathroom and saw his baby sister, and he asked his mom what was wrong with her. It's not known what she said, but whatever it was, it scared Noah so much that he took off running. Sadly, Andrea caught up to him and drowned him as well, right next to his baby sister. This time, she took baby Mary's body and put her in John's arms in the bed, as if they were all sleeping, and she left Noah floating in the tub. Andrea then very calmly called 911 and told the operator that she needed an officer, but she wouldn't tell them why. When police and paramedics arrived at her house, they walked into a very disturbing and heartbreaking scene. Needless to say, Andrea was quickly arrested, where she then confessed to drowning all 5 of her kids one by one in the tub. She told police that she waited for her husband Rusty to leave for work because she knew he would interrupt her killing them. And she also went out of her way to lock their family dog up in a cage, which it usually wasn't, because she knew that the dog would also try and interfere with her drowning the kids. Despite her eerie confession, Rusty stood by her and actually got one of their family friends to be her attorney. At the trial, the main focal point was Andrea's postpartum depression and psychosis, and her team was trying to push for the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. The defense agreed that she was psychotic and very ill, but Texas law requires that in order to successfully assert the insanity defense, the defendant must prove that they could not discern right from wrong at the time of the crime. And in this case, it was hard to prove because she admitted to waiting for Rusty to leave for work to kill her kids, even going so far as to subdue the dog so it wouldn't get in her way. Because of this, at the first trial in 2002, the jury rejected the insanity defense. They found her guilty on all 5 counts of murder, and although prosecutors sought the death penalty, Andrea was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 40 years. This sentence didn't last very long though, because in 2006, the Texas Court of Appeals reversed the conviction. One of the main reasons for doing this was because a California psychologist and prosecution witness for this case, named Dr. Park Dietz, admitted to giving a false testimony during Andrea's trial. He gave a testimony that right before the murders, an episode of Law & Order aired on TV that featured a woman who drowned her kids, but was acquitted of murder by reason of insanity. What's super crazy and coincidental though, is that an author who just so happened to be covering the Yates trial for the Oprah magazine and NBC News had also previously been a writer for Law & Order, and she knew for a fact that no such episode like the one Dr. Park mentioned had ever existed at this point. It just wasn't true. And so the Texas Court of Appeals then said that the jury could have been influenced by this false testimony, so a new trial was needed. A little side note before I continue, but a Law & Order episode did air 2 years later that was based on Andrea's case, but it never existed at the time of the trial. So at the new trial, authorities tried saying that Andrea committed this crime for spousal revenge, but this avenue was thoroughly explored and no evidence was found for this. This time around, Andrea pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and the new jury agreed with this. She was then granted immediate release on the condition that she be admitted to a mental health treatment facility, at least for some time before returning back into society. So off Andrea went to the Kerrville State Hospital, where she has remained ever since. Every year, she's able to go through a competency hearing, where it could be a real possibility for her to be released. But time and time again, she waives her right to the hearing, voluntarily choosing to stay at the mental health facility. I don't know if this is a sign of guilt or if she truly doesn't think she can get better, but one of the biggest points of contention in this case is Rusty's role or responsibility. Andrea's doctor advised him not to leave her alone with the kids at any point, but in the weeks leading up to the murders, he did just that. He said he thought that it would help her improve her independence. He confessed to her family just 1 week before this tragic event that he would leave her alone for an hour every morning and every night. And he did this so she wouldn't be so totally dependent on him and his family for her own maternal responsibilities. His view on mental health was reportedly not great, and Andrea's family said that Rusty believed all depressed people needed was a swift kick in the pants to get them motivated. These were all his words. Rusty also said that he was never made aware that she was psychotic, or that her first doctor advised against having more children, even though the doctor's notes clearly stated that it should not happen. But what's super sad is that Andrea told her prison psychiatrist that this was not the case, and that prior to her and Rusty's last child, she did not want to have sex because that meant that she could possibly hurt her kids. But Rusty pressured her into it, saying not to worry, she was a good mom and could handle more kids. But Rusty even said during the trial that he thought she'd be found innocent, and he wanted to have even more kids with her once she was treated by any means necessary. How crazy is that, she was so mentally ill that she killed all 5 of their kids one by one. Yet his strong religious beliefs made him want to continue having kids with her by any means necessary. That's twisted and super disturbing, and honestly, so irresponsible and dangerous of him. Once she was initially found guilty, Rusty went on the record and blamed her new psychiatrist, not himself, for not recognizing and treating her psychosis. He said they legally had to release her from the hospital after 10 days due to an insurance constraint from their provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield. This, in his words, makes it their fault. A different doctor weighing in kind of backed him up on this logic, saying the reason Andrea did this could be because of Effexor, which is an antidepressant. Her new psychiatrist had taken her cold turkey off of Haldol and put her on this other drug. So for the entire month before the murders, Andrea was taking 450 milligrams of Effexor, which is twice the recommended maximum dose. This drug was known to possibly cause homicidal ideations. Other doctors say that this dosage/prescription isn't completely unusual, and it could have nothing to do with her committing this crime. It could also be that she stopped taking Haldol cold turkey, which caused her to snap. While she was in prison, Andrea told her psychiatrist that she had been partially influenced by a close family friend on Rusty's side who was very religious. This caused her to believe that her kids were going to hell and couldn't be saved because of her own struggles, and the only way out was to kill them. She said she planned to kill them for about 2 years, and then went on to say, quote, "It was the 7th deadly sin. My children weren't righteous. They stumbled because I was evil. The way I was raising them, they could never be saved. They were doomed to perish in the fires of hell." End quote. In 2005, Rusty divorced Andrea and went on to get remarried and have another child. They have since divorced as well. This is one of the few cases that really shook not just Texas, but the entire world. What makes this case so haunting isn't just what she did. It's that she seemingly loved her kids. Every single person who knows her says that. But postpartum depression and psychosis had such a terrifying grip on her that love wasn't enough to fight it. And here's what really disturbs me. Postpartum depression affects up to 1 in 5 new moms. Happens in about 2 out of every 1,000 births. Those numbers might sound small, but when it's left untreated, the consequences can be catastrophic. And yet, nobody wants to talk about it. There's so much stigma around this and so much silence. But if we keep looking away, if we keep treating it like something that only happens once in a blue moon, then tragedies like this don't just stay in the past, they repeat. And that's the part that should keep all of us up at night.
You might want to go grab some tape your jaw shut, because odds of your jaw being on the floor when you hear this story are high. But I'm happy to say it's the best ending to the worst story. Guys, this is the very first story I ever told on TikTok, and back then I pronounced her name wrong. I said Alison Botha, but I think it's Alison Botha. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm probably so wrong, but I just went to her TikTok profile to make sure I pronounced it correctly. She follows me. Allison, yeah, I'm never gonna get over that. Allison, message me, I need to talk. Nevertheless, this is the story of Alison Botha, one of the most insane stories I've ever heard to this day. Also, just want to say, in case Allison sees this, Allison, you were literally the biggest inspiration to so many people, and I look up to you so much, but let's get into it. The 2 perpetrators that Allison had the misfortune of meeting were France and Tiance. A little bit of background on both. France was the son to a policeman. Childhood, fine. When he was a teenager, not fine. He made friends with the wrong crowd, was an absolute menace, got expelled from school, causing him and his family to move to what was back then known as Port Elizabeth in South Africa. One of France's biggest and favorite hobbies became worshiping the devil. Yes, he got a girlfriend who claimed to be the head witch of a coven, and together they spent a lot of time doing rituals and manifesting demons. And I know Satanism doesn't always mean worshiping the devil, but in this case it does. Fran soon dropped out of school and started claiming that he was possessed by the devil. And then he went into the army. How scary is that? A man that is claiming to be possessed by the devil being in charge and around so many weapons. He left the army, got married, had a baby, abandoned his family, got married again, had another baby, and throughout it all he was still getting in trouble with the law, committing petty crimes, and continuing to claim that he had supernatural powers from Satan himself. At 26 years old, France meets 19-year-old Tiance. Tiance had a rough upbringing. He was not born into the greatest family, unfortunately. At 15 years old, he dropped out of school, turned to substances to cope, got involved in petty crime, and then eventually also joined the army. That was one of the things that him and France had in common, but Tiance also dated a witch girlfriend, and the 2 of them worshipped the devil together as well. France and Tiance met in June of 1994, and they would become a volatile pairing. Franz told his new friend Tians that he possessed the power of the devil, and I think that Tians started to look up to Franz a little bit. The two of them would go on to do horrible, disgusting things. They frequently visited graveyards in the middle of the night doing weird things, and then they would go on an SA spree. They would go out looking for women to attack an SA simply because they wanted to. And because Franz specifically thought that he deserved to, because he thought he was so attractive that women loved him, and he thought that he deserved to get whatever he wanted to get from them. Sick, sick, sick. On December 4th of 1994, Franz and Tians SA'd a victim together, a 21-year-old woman that was 3 months pregnant. After the attack, the woman went straight to the police station and reported it. Franz and Tians got arrested, but released pending a further court appearance, and it was before that pending court appearance that Allison would be taken as their victim and put through things no human being should ever be put through, let alone survive. Allison surviving the things that she was put through was unheard of. To me, there's no other way to describe it other than a miracle, truly. Allison Bata grew up a very happy and loved girl. Her mother raised her in a beautiful way, and she was really raised to be such an incredible person with nothing but love to give. At the time of this case, Allison was 27 years old, and she was thriving, living her best life. She had graduated school, spent a few years traveling around, and had chosen to settle down in what was known back then as Port Elizabeth in South Africa. December 18th of 1994, it was a Sunday. After a fun night out with her friends, Allison came home after dropping off one of her friends at her apartment. She pulled into her parking lot, pulls in, parks her car, turns her car off, and all of a sudden someone swings open her driver's side door, and Allison is caught so off guard when she sees a man standing right outside her door with a sharp weapon. That man was 26-year-old Franz. He looked at her and said, quote, "Move over or I will kill you," end quote. At first, Franz keeps telling Allison that he's not gonna hurt her. He says that he just needs her car for something. Big fat lie. Franz asks Allison what her name is. She quicks quick on her feet and tells him a fake name. Allison asks Franz what his name is, and he also gives a fake name. And Allison is trying to keep her calm, incredibly good under the worst kind of pressure, but she is pleading for him to let her out of the car. She says, "Just let me out, you can keep the car." But Franz, of course, has bad intentions. He tells her that he just needs to go and find his friend, so they drive to go find this friend. The friend, who is none other than 19-year-old Tians. Tians gets in the back of the car, and his eyes look scary. They're just black. They just look evil, and I imagine Allison's stomach turned at just the sight of him. This was late at night, by the way. It was dark outside, and Franz drove the three of them until there was no other cars around, and he pulled into a secluded area. Tians gets out of the car, leaving Franz and Allison alone, and Franz turns to her and says, "Are you going to fight?" And then he continues to SA her aggressively. Allison, in that moment, remembers trying to keep her dignity, aware of what was going on, but she kept thinking to herself, "He is doing this to your body, not to you. Your mind is safe. He can't touch your mind. You will get through this." She just kept repeating that to herself over and over again, tried to disassociate from what was going on, from the terrible situation that she was in. After Franz was done, he looked at Tians outside of the car and asked him if he wanted to SA Allison, talking about her in the most degrading manner, and Tians says yes, and he goes in the car and he takes his turn in SAing her. After that, the two of them stand there and discuss if they should let Allison go or if they should kill her. And remember, the two of them are pending a court appearance for the SA case they just committed 14 days ago, so the two of them in their little pea-sized brains, they're like, no, we shouldn't let her go, because if we let her go and she goes to the police, we will get in more trouble. So the two of them think that they have no other choice but to murder her. They're having this discussion right in front of Allison, and because their brains are so small, they're talking amongst themselves. They're using their real names, Franz and Tians, and Allison takes note of that, which is very important. Before she knew it, Allison was outside of the car on the ground. Franz was on top of her, attacking her with both of his hands around her neck, using as much force as he could, to the point where he crushed her windpipe, cutting off her air supply completely, causing Allison to zone out. Then Franz grabbed the sharp weapon, took it to Allison's stomach over and over again, like a frenzy attack 35 times, and him and Tians thought that that would be it. But then they realized that Allison was still alive, so they took the sharp weapon across her neck 16 times. And remember, Franz had crushed Allison's windpipe with his hands, and unknowingly so, when he took the sharp weapon, he cut through the windpipe, giving her air supply again. So basically, he did the opposite of what he was trying to do. Allison regains consciousness. She comes back to it when she hears Franz and Tians again talking amongst themselves about whether or not they think she's still alive. When she hears this, she stays as still as she possibly can to make them think that she isn't. And it works. They leave her there, deciding that there was no possible way that she could have survived that attack. They throw her clothes that were inside of the car out of the car, and they drive off in her car. Allison is left there, lying on the ground in the dark in the middle of nowhere, attempting to assess the situation, trying to figure out what to do next, and I don't even know how. She had at least 50 injuries. I don't even know how your mind can come up with a clear thought thought, but she's trying to think when she hears a gurgling sound. She's confused for a second until she realizes that that sound is coming from her throat. The sound was her windpipe. They're just going in and out through it because she can't control it. She goes to feel her neck with her hand, but she feels nothing. Because her injuries are so severe, there's just a massive gaping hole and she feels nothing but blood. Allison laid on that floor and she thought, I'm not gonna let them get away with this. I'm not gonna let them do this to another person. She thought that at the very least she would do what she could to hope and try and help her attackers get her caught, which is when she took the little strength that she had left and wrote their names on the sand, Franz and Tien's. Right after that, she wrote on the sand what she wanted people to know that she was thinking about before she passed. She took her hand and she wrote, I love mom. And then Allison continued to lay there thinking that this was the end, but it wasn't. And Allison has said, quote, I realized my life was too valuable to let go of, and that gave me the courage to survive, end quote. That gives me chills every time. Also, now is a good time for me to tell you, if you have a queasy stomach, you should probably go. Allison started to move, thinking, I may as well give it my all. I'm not going to go down without a fight. When she started to get up on her feet, she was on her hands and knees when she felt something wet and something slimy on her feet. It was her intestines. Franz and Tien's had injured her abdomen so bad that her intestines were falling out of her body. She struggled trying to gather them back together, putting them back inside of her when she noticed that her shirt had been thrown out of the car. She grabbed the shirt and used that to pack her intestines inside of her and pulled it as close as she could against her to try and keep them in. And Allison tried to stand back up again, but then her vision went black. She couldn't see anything, so she's holding her intestines in with one hand. And with the other, she reaches up to her eyes to see what's going on, but she feels nothing. There's nothing there. Because of the injuries to her neck and her throat, her head was hanging off backwards. She couldn't see because her head was halfway detached off her body. So with her only free hand, she reaches up to her head behind her body, pulls her head forward kind of back in place, helping her vision return temporarily. She's literally holding her body together with both of her hands. I have no clue. The strength it must have taken is hard for me to comprehend. Allison managed to drag herself onto the road, the full moon lighting her path, hoping that somebody would stop and rescue her. When she got to the road, she collapsed. She saw headlights. One car drove towards her, but straight past her, but the second car stopped, thankfully. In that car was a man called Tien, not to be confused with the perpetrator, Tien's. Other people were in the car as well, but he was a vet, so he had some sort of medical knowledge, and he was an absolute hero that night. As soon as he saw Allison's injuries, he ripped off his shirt and used it to apply pressure on Allison's injuries. He had also noticed that Allison's thyroid was out of her neck, and he had some knowledge in medicine, obviously, so he knew how to place the thyroid back in place somehow, while one of his other friends called 911. The ambulance took so long to get there. 2 hours, 2 whole hours. What do you mean? But the entire time Tien was trying to do everything that he could to keep Allison with him. He came up with a system for her to